Another day, another life. Yellow, and welcome to live book reading sessions with me, Grace. This week we are reading A Short Stay in Hell by Stephen L. Peck, and we're reading chapter 3. First of all, I hope we're all doing good. I hope the weather is great wherever we are. And let me know if you have read the book, A Short Stay in Hell, or if you plan on reading it. I don't know if you've not read it, I don't know if this will count as like spoilers. It should. But yeah. Okay, let's get into it. Chapter 3. Year 102, the most significant text. Let me just get water. Chapter 3, Year 102, the most significant text. Master, how do you pronounce this? I need to be doing pronunciation exercises before I come here. I am going to butcher. Master Treco called the meeting to order. As professor of geology, I had a seat on the fifth row and could see him standing tall on the stage of stacked books, smiling brightly in his purple robe dyed with grape juice. A few curious onlookers from the barbarous other side of the chasm were shouting rude remarks, but as always we ignored them. I turned around and looked at my bedmate Sandra, who was a few rows back, assistant professor of calculus. She gave me a smile, looked at Straco and rolled her eyes. I smiled back and nodded. Straco cleared his throat as a signal we were to quiet down and attend. We will begin with a musical number by our university music ensemble. As he said this, he cast a scroll my way. I was supposed to play this morning, but my turkey-bone flute had been CU'd, that is cleaned up, last night, and I had not had time to carve another. However, it came loose from the strap around my leg where I had bound it. It was a shame because I had managed to hold on to it for over a year. Oh well, c'est la vie. The music was lovely and I did feel a tinge of guilt that I was not there. I was also a little disappointed that the flute I was also a little disappointed that the flute sounded so strong without me. By ordering raw intestines to eat, several types of herbs had been created by stretching the guts between the book casing and the railing, or up and down the railing. It took most of the morning to set up this instrument, so the music they created was well appreciated. Even the barbarians in the stacks across the gap stopped heckling us while the music played. After a loud and appreciative applause, Traco stood up again. Our invocation to the great god of Zoroastrianism will be offered by Professor Donaldson. After her prayer, this year's most significant text will be read by Dr. Rachel Hansnick. Dr. Carter will introduce the text with an award presented to Steele Sand, who found the text 3 months ago on level minus 56 in row 5, book 48 in area minus 388. There were a number of entries that might have been contenders for the MST, but when this one was found, there was no question of this year's winner. Professor Donaldson stood and raised his hands into the air. Great God, whose heaven we eagerly await, we are gathered here on the first day of the 102nd year of our time in hell to praise you and to honor your memory and presence. Bless these proceedings that we may find favor in your sight, that we may be led to our life stories, that the days of our imprisonment may be short. Bless our efforts. May peace be had in all our districts. May the search be undeterred. Bless our university that it may continue to prosper, that its leaders and councils may be wise in teaching truth to the inhabitants of hell. May we be led to be better people by combining our knowledge and teaching one another the truths gleaned from our lives while on earth. About here, I faded out and snuck a peek at Sandra, who seemed to be sincerely participating in the prayer. While I would never admit it to the administrators of the university, I was more than skeptical about trying to pray. What kind of God lets demons choose such a bizarre hell? Why put conscious beings through this? What purpose could it serve him or us? Was he, she, it worthy of worship? I honestly didn't know. Still, the finder of this year's most significant text was introduced and given an award. A piece of soap from the showers carved into an amazing replica of a chicken, which had been placed in a nest of coconut fiber. It is impressive what you can get out of the food kiosks. Apparently, if it's possible to eat, you can ask for it. Rachel got up to read the text. She was a good friend, and we had spent many a day in long talks and thoughtful conversation about the nature of life, reality, and the complications of the afterlife. She had been the editor of a literary magazine before hell, and now held a post in the philosophy group as professor of health studies. She received the book she was handed with great solemnity. She opened it. Reading from page 87, I quote, "The bat housed again 4 leaves of it." There was a deep silence as people pondered the significance of this passage. Barbara handed the book to Professor Treacle, who continued. First, note that the text is a complete sentence. Significantly, it begins with a capitalized article and ends in a period. Notice the subject bat and the verb house refers to 4 leaves, and we find out that they belong to of it. Never before have we found such a perfect example of a complex sentence. Still, Sand is to be highly praised for finding this year's most significant text. Its location has been memorized by all here, and I think there will be many who will want to visit the site of this book and ponder its meaning. Thank you again, Stu. Treacle turned towards him and with a slight bow of his head began to clap politely. We all joined in. Joanna's back, a food scientist, turned to me as we clapped and whispered to me sardonically, "I know exactly what it means, and I don't have to ponder it much. It means it's going to be 1,000 years before we find a paragraph that makes as much sense as this stupid sentence." I laughed and nodded, but inside, of course, it disheartened me. We'd been here for over 100 years, and this was the most significant text this year. Last year's was worse. Can die dogs riverward. Everyone was abuzz about how this year's sentence started with an article. had a great verb, and even seemed to make a little sense. But it made me realize it would be a long time before we found anyone's story, let alone mine. The proceedings over, the people began to disband. A few had come from a long way, some from as far as the 12,853rd floor, and some as far away as 22,889 shelves over. The university was well thought of, and the people knew its reputation even a great distance from its origin. I felt blessed to be on the faculty. I saw Rachel standing by herself holding the book she had just read from. "Hi, nice reading," I said as she looked up. "Thanks," she said, smiling slightly. Another year down and another significant find. I gave a soft laugh, more like an audible smirk. "Always the unbeliever, eh?" she said. "It's just been so long. Over 2 of my lifetimes on earth," I replied, feeling sorry for myself, and I found one coherent phrase in that time. "Light bulb, ocean left, of all things." She smiled. "Ah, yes, the MST of 25. "Exactly," I continued, "and I've not found a thing since." That was a nice sentence today, by the way, but Stu's a digger. He spends most of the day with his face in the books, scanning. I can't scan more than an hour or so before I just can't stand it anymore. Yeah, me neither. We stood in silence for a moment, and I asked if I could see the text. It had been in Stu's possession for most of the time, and he had just given it up a week ago. She nodded and handed me the book. I opened to the page and stared at the text. A thrill ran down me as I saw those words embedded in a sea of gibberish. Real words with meaning, as if they had been in a sentence from a real book printed long ago on earth. I looked at it for a long while, enjoying the feel of the book's weight and the deep satisfaction of finding an island of sensible text in an ocean of meaningless. It does bring a modicum of hope. Yes, it does. And maybe some despair. I looked at Rachel. Since we were all white, little differences were magnified, and her freckles made her seem different and mysterious in a way that almost intimidated me. I knew what despair she was talking about. This little nonsensical sentence was all that a group of over 75 people could show for 100 years' worth of effort. She continued, "And I am sick of it. I am sick of the monotony. I'm sick of this university. I'm sick of listening to people's life story. I'm sick of listening to people repeating book. I'm sick of listening to people repeating books they've read when they were alive." Her eyes were starting to water. "And do you know what I hate most of all?" "What?" I said, sympathetically as I could. But I could guess what was coming. "I'm sick of having nothing to look forward to. I'm sick of not having any dreams. I've spent 100 years, 4 times my earthly life, looking for a book that exists somewhere in an infinity of gibberish. I can't do it anymore. I'm sick of it." She suddenly kicked the chaos as hard as she could and then melted down beside it, crying. I just stood there. For a moment, such breakdowns were common. We were all sick of it. If I let it get away from me at all, I could be in the same state in a matter of minutes. I knelt beside her and lifted her up. I found tears running down my face. It surprised me. Something about the day, reading the damn text, and making such a big deal about something so stupid has raised my feelings to the surface too. She looked at me, noticed I was crying too, and smiled. Bad day, I agreed. I helped her to her feet and she took a step and winced in pain. "I think I broke my toe," she laughed. "Probably," I said. You kicked that thing pretty hard. It will be healed in the morning. Yeah, of course. She looked around. There was still a good crowd of people around. Sandra was looking my direction, wondering, I could tell, whether I was going to join her for dinner or keep talking to Rachel all evening. Sandra and I had been bunking together for about 3 years. I liked Sandra. We had a great deal in common and I was going to miss her. It seemed funny that the time that I would think it seemed funny at the time that I would think that right then, but I knew it was true. I could tell something big was about to happen. I'm not sure how I knew, but I did. Rachel glanced at the direction I was looking and said, "You'd better go. Sandra's a jealous shriek. I can feel Sandra's got a jealous shriek I could feel from here." "I'll be alright, go on, I'm fine." I ignored her. "You were on Exploration 58, weren't you?" I was. "Tell me about it," I said, with Sandra still glaring at me from the distance. "I don't think I've ever heard your version." She gave me a grateful look and began. "Well, as you know, there were 8 of us. Dr. Cummings spearheaded the whole thing. He put together the 4 teams of 8 who were to travel up, down, left and right until we came to the end of the hall, or to the bottom floor or the top floor. But the idea was none of us would return until we found an end, even if it took 20 years. Are you sure you want to hear this? It's not a very interesting story." I nodded vigorously. "Well, I was on the team with Cassandra, the anthropologist, right?" "No, she's the Marxist economist." "Right, go on." "And Jed, Conrad, Katrina, Daphne, the tall Daphne with blonde hair, Mike, Rudy, and Doc." I nodded at the familiar names. "We went left. Every day we would walk until noon, eat something, and walk on till it was time to spend the night. After about a month, we started running into people who hadn't heard of our university, but they were always eager for news from far away. Never any diversity, of course. No old people, no children, no blacks, no Asians, no Hispanics, just bland, ever-present whites. Things seemed civil everywhere we went, unlike the barbaric behavior and rape gangs across the divide. Strangely, after about 6 months, people started getting scarce. And a week after that, they disappeared completely. We were alone. The books continued. The sleeping rooms continued on the same interval. We had always seen them, but no people. At first, it was pleasurable. We frolicked like kids in some secret place. But after a month, we began to feel lonely. After a year, we really had nothing to say to each other, and we were on each other's nerves so bad we started sleeping in separate rooms at night. But we had our charge, and on we walked. We walked a year further and never said a word to each other. The following year, the girls banded together and talked from time to time. The year after, a few romances and occasional conversations continued. It was on the anniversary of our 5th year that we suddenly just stopped. No one said anything. We just stopped walking, looked at each other, and turned around and came home. I can't tell you what it was like to find people again. I think the first man we ran into thought we were off our rockers, but it had been over 9 years since we had seen another face, and we couldn't leave him alone. I'm sure he felt like a celebrity with all of us fawning over him. 9 years with only 8 faces. It was horrible. She fell into a thoughtful silence. I said. I've heard the same from people who went up and down. After a while, people disappeared, but the books went up on and on. Weren't the up group gone for 25 years? 23, but who's counting? And one never came back. Julia Hatch, wasn't it? I knew her a little. I think so. They said when she finally turned around, she just said, "Not me," and kept climbing. I wonder if she's still climbing. I noticed Sandra was really scowling at me. I knew in a moment she would storm off, but I just wanted to talk to Rachel. She noticed Sandra too. "You'd better go. She's not very happy." I shook my head and lowered my voice. "Do you think this is really a Zoroastrian hell?" A resident non-believer. How can you doubt it? We were all told the same story by a great demon. There's a sign posted every 50 yards that tells us it is. I don't see any way around the reality of being here. We all wake up to the same set of rules, the same consistency. Why do you doubt? I don't really doubt. I just want to. I think in part it's the lack of diversity, the lack of nuance, like the veins of a leaf or the grains in a piece of feldspar, the lack of variety and detail. I keep wondering about the I keep worrying about the idealist perspective that our minds are sitting in a jar somewhere and all this is a projection of some sort. That kind of input would be easier to maintain if you didn't have to worry about detailing a dragon's fly wings. Do you believe that's the case? That only you are real? Rachel said slyly. I sighed. No, not really. I can't take solipsism seriously. I smiled at her and added, "At least I know you are real." She gave me a big smile, amused by my Maldian pronunciation, but quickly glanced over to where Sandra had been standing. Sandra was gone. I was glad. It seemed funny that one day I would go off to bed in her arms and the next not feel anything. It was like a switch had gone off. But no, that wasn't honest either. This had been building for a long time. Our silences were getting longer, our arguments more frequent. How do you stay with someone when there's no dream to build, no purpose to accomplish, no meaning? No meaning. That was the monster that drove us away from one another in the end. Always. Okay, we're going to stop here. I've basically gone through half of chapter 3. It's a very short book. It's 70 pages, so don't expect it to be this short. Thank you for joining the reading. Thank you for joining the reading. I will see you tomorrow for the next reading. Is this going to be today's? We might have one more reading. No, I don't think so. I think this is the last reading before I post the book review, and we'll go to the next book. Thank you to everybody that has joined in, and I will see you in the next one. Bye bye.